Have you ever felt uncomfortable being by yourself? Does that silence, that void bother you? Many dread being alone not for its own sake, but rather for what it exposes about others. When the world's cacophony subsides, all that remains is you, your thoughts, your worries, your regrets, your aspirations. And that is precisely why so many people flee from it. But what if I said being alone is a power, not a curse? A power that, if grasped, may revolutionize your thoughts, your confidence, and your entire existence. Staying to the conclusion of this film will help you to discover something many people overlook. Loneliness is not weakness. It is where strength was born. What makes us dread loneliness? From early on, we are trained to think that being alone is a negative. Society teaches us that if we're not always surrounded by people, something is wrong with us. Social media reinforces the assumption that pleasure involves being liked, followed, validated. We've been conditioned to think being alone equals being undesired. But that is a falsehood. The truth is, people who fear being alone are often terrified of their own minds. They shun stillness because in that silence, they're forced to face who they truly are. But here's the secret: confronting yourself is the first step to mastering your life. It's where self-discovery begins. Think about it. How can you possibly comprehend yourself if you're never alone with your thoughts? If you're constantly distracted, always occupied, always fleeing from silence? Solitude is where real self-awareness is born. In those quiet times, you begin to comprehend your desires, your objectives, your flaws, and your strengths. In alone, your mind wakes up, yet most individuals never experience this awakening because they're terrified, afraid of what they might uncover, afraid of confronting insecurities, afraid of recognizing they've been living a life built on other people's expectations. That's why so many feel lost. They don't know what they want. Since they've never asked themselves, the mind develops strong in solitude. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of self. The greatest thinkers in history knew this. They didn't dread being alone, they enjoyed it. They realized that seclusion is where serious thinking happens, where creativity is developed, where genuine strength is built. When you learn to be alone, you obtain something most others never will: mental independence. You cease requiring approval. You quit craving validation. You stop being dominated by the opinions of others. Because here's the truth: the person who is comfortable being alone is the most powerful person in the world. Why? Because they are free. The reward of embracing solitude. Imagine waking up with a clean mind, not worrying about what others think, without needing anyone to tell you who you are. Imagine feeling fully at peace with yourself. Imagine having the mental strength to travel your own path, without fear, without doubt. This is the power solitude offers you. Most individuals will never feel it. They'll always seek distractions. They'll always run from stillness. They'll always fear being alone. But if you choose to accept isolation, you'll uncover something remarkable. You'll create a mind that's unbreakable. You'll gain a strength no one can steal from you. You'll become someone who doesn't need the world's approval because you have your own. And this is just the beginning. Stay with me. Because as this video continues, you'll understand how solitude can turn you into the strongest version of yourself. You'll discover how being alone can unleash your potential, awaken your actual self, and give you a power most people don't even know exists. Are you ready? Because what happens next will change the way you see solitude forever. Most people seldom notice how much noise surrounds them. The incessant voices, the infinite opinions, the distractions pulling them in every direction. They spend their lives reacting to the world, never stopping to listen to the one voice that counts most: their own. But when you are alone, something spectacular happens. The noise fades. The distractions disappear. And for the first time, you can hear your own thoughts plainly. This is where the mind awakens. Solitude provides you the space to think deeply, to question, to contemplate. In these moments of silence, your mind begins to organize everything you've been avoiding: your emotions, your ambitions, your worries, your strengths. You start to recognize patterns in your life that were previously invisible. You begin to comprehend what genuinely matters to you. This is why most individuals fear being alone, because in that silence, there are no excuses, no distractions, no one to blame. It's just you and the truth. And that truth can be uncomfortable. It can disclose your shortcomings. It might expose your insecurities, but it also holds the key to your power. If you can sit alone without distractions, without retreating from yourself, you'll discover something most people never find: perfect mental clarity. Think about the greatest decisions of your life. Did they come from chaos, or did they arrive in a time of intense thought? Every breakthrough, every great understanding comes from solitude. Yet most people never allow themselves to experience it. They drown in distractions. They avoid quiet. They chose noise over clarity, comfort over truth. But those who accept solitude, they are the ones who rise. They are the ones who control their minds instead of being ruled by the world. Because in solitude, your mind doesn't just rest. It sharpens. It grows stronger. It becomes a weapon that no one can manipulate. And once you access that ability, you'll never fear being alone again. Most people go through life without ever genuinely knowing themselves. They follow rituals, crave praise, and live by expectations that aren't their own. They become mirrors of the world around them instead of manifestations of who they actually are. But when you're alone, truly alone, you begin to see yourself clearly. Solitude is the mirror that reflects your actual self. At first, it could seem uncomfortable. When the distractions are gone, your mind begins to ask questions. Who am I? What do I genuinely want? Am I living my life or someone else's? These inquiries can feel unnerving because they compel you to confront the truth about your anxieties, your limitations, and the dreams you've buried under duties and expectations. But this soreness is a gift, because the instant you face yourself, you take the first step toward transformation. Most folks never do this. They dread solitude because they don't want to face their uncertainties, their regrets. So they remain busy, stay distracted, and stay lost. But those who welcome solitude, they become steadfast. Because once you understand yourself, no one can define you. No one can manipulate you. No one can tell you who to be, because you already know. Solitude strips away the illusions and leaves you with one thing: the truth. And the truth is, you are stronger than you realize. You are capable of more than you believe. But you'll never realize this unless you take the time to sit with yourself in silence and listen. When you stop fearing alone, you start discovering your strength. And that is when your life begins to change. Most people live on the surface, reacting, rushing, doing. They never stop to think deeply, to question, to ponder. They're overwhelmed by distractions, moving from one thing to the next without ever asking, why am I doing this? Where am I going? But when you're alone, something shifts. The noise diminishes and your mind is free to explore deeper. This is where actual intelligence is produced. This is where breakthroughs happen. Because deep thinking is a power most people never employ. When you allow yourself to sit in isolation, your thoughts calm down. You begin to link ideas, to discover solutions that were once concealed. You gain clarity not only about the world, but about yourself. Your desires become clearer. Your priorities sharpen. You stop following what everyone else is doing and start building your own path. But most individuals never experience this. They fear the silence, so they fill it with meaningless noise. They drown in diversions, never giving their minds the space they need to look beyond the usual. This is why so many individuals feel lost. They don't lack intelligence. They lack time alone with their own ideas. They're too busy keeping up with the world to ever pause and ask, what do I actually want? What do I genuinely believe? Great ideas, powerful decisions, and life-changing realizations don't originate from noise. They come from solitude. Every invention, every masterpiece, every important innovation in history began with someone who dared to sit alone and think. When you accept isolation, you unlock your mind's fullest potential. You stop responding to life and start creating it. You stop living by default and begin living by design. Because once you learn to think deeply, you'll never again be governed by shallow diversions. And that's when true power begins. Most people depend on others to regulate their emotions. They seek comfort, distraction, acceptance, and approval from the world. When people feel empty, they look for something or someone to fill the hole. But what happens when no one is there? What happens when you must face your feelings alone? This is where true strength is created. Emotional power is not developed in crowds. It is forged in solitude. When you're alone, there's no one to raise you up, no one to reassure you, and no one to distract you from your misery. At first, this feels awful. You started detecting emotions you've ignored: fear, sadness, impatience, regret. But instead of running, you sit with them. You feel them, you comprehend them. And that is where transformation begins. Because emotions aren't enemies, they're instructors. Solitude forces you to process what you've been avoiding. It teaches resilience, patience, and self-control. It enhances your ability to stand strong even when no one is applauding for you. It builds a mind that doesn't crack under strain. Most people never attain this level of strength because they avoid the unpleasantness of being alone. They surround themselves with people attempting to escape their inner struggles. But real confidence doesn't come from external support. It comes from knowing you can stand on your own. When you master isolation, you master yourself. You cease depending on others to make you feel whole. You stop fearing loneliness because you learn that being alone doesn't mean being empty. It means being in charge. And once you attain this level of emotional power, nothing can break you. Most individuals are uneasy with silence. They flood every minute with noise, music, chat, social media, innumerable distractions. They think quiet is empty, dull, or even menacing. But such belief is false. Silence isn't emptiness. Silence is power. In a world that never stops talking, those who master stillness have an edge, because in silence, something wonderful happens. You start hearing what genuinely matters. You hear your thoughts without hindrance. You hear the emotions you've been avoiding. You hear the inner voice that has been muffled out by the world's opinions. And that voice, that is the genuine you. Silence offers clarity. Think about it. When was the last time you genuinely sat in silence? No interruptions, no background noise, just you alone with your thoughts. If that concept makes you uncomfortable, it suggests you've been avoiding yourself. And that is exactly why you need it, because silence is where wisdom grows. It's where the finest minds find their ideas. It's where strength is built and self-awareness is heightened. When you accept silence, you learn to consider before reacting. You learn to watch before speaking. You learn patience, discipline, and control over your mind. Most individuals fear quiet because they fear facing themselves. But those who learn to sit in silence without restlessness, they become unstoppable. They don't squander words. They don't seek unneeded validation. They listen more, understand more, and see what others miss. Silence is not weakness. It is mastery. And those who master it wield a power the noisy world will never understand. Most people associate being alone with being lonely. They assume solitude is a symptom of emptiness, isolation, or something lacking. But that's a misconception. Loneliness is a longing for others. Being alone is an acceptance of oneself. Loneliness seems like a void, aching need for connection, for someone to fill the stillness. It stems from dependency, from wanting external validation to feel fulfilled. But being alone, that is a choice, a power, a condition of fullness, not emptiness. When you're actually comfortable being alone, you don't seek people out of need. You don't dread silence. You don't feel incomplete without a crowd. Instead, you like your own company. You utilize isolation to think, to grow, and to strengthen oneself. The difference between loneliness and being alone is mindset. A weak mind dreads being alone since it hasn't learned how to be independent. A strong mind regards solitude as an opportunity, a time to focus, grow, and master emotions without depending on others. Loneliness is a burden, isolation is power. Think about the strongest, most resilient people you know. Do they continuously surround themselves with noise and distractions, or do they have an energy that feels whole even in silence? The strongest people don't shun solitude. They embrace it because they're not afraid of their own ideas. When you adjust your mentality, being alone stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like freedom. You stop waiting for others to make you feel complete. You quit craving approval. You realize that all you need is already within you. Once you grasp it, you will never feel lonely again. Most people think confidence comes from external validation, attention, praise, approval from others. But that type of confidence is fragile. It fades the instant people stop clapping. Real confidence doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within, and solitude is where it is formed. When you spend time alone, without distractions, without people instructing you who to be, something tremendous happens. You cease relying on the world to define you. You cease seeking permission to be yourself. You start discovering your true worth. Confidence isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's not about proving yourself to others. It's about understanding deep inside that you don't need validation to feel strong. The only way to achieve that level is by facing yourself in alone. Most folks never do this. They surround themselves with people because they dread their own thoughts. They pursue approval because they don't trust their own decisions. But those who accept solitude build a different type of confidence, one that can't be shaken. When you learn to be alone, you learn to trust yourself. You start making decisions without doubting yourself. You begin believing in your talents without seeking continual reassurance. You enter into any circumstance with quiet strength because you know who you are. That is actual confidence, and it's rare. Most people will never find it since they'll always look outside themselves for validation. But those who welcome isolation become steadfast. They don't beg for approval. They don't follow the crowd, they lead. Once you establish that type of confidence, no one can take it away from you. Most people never reach their full potential, not because they lack talent, intelligence, or chances, but because they are always distracted. They spend their lives following the noise, conforming to the expectations of others, and losing themselves in the process. But solitude affects everything. When you're alone, you finally have the room to focus on yourself, to grow, progress, and evolve. Think about it, every skill you've ever acquired, every moment of actual development happened when you had time to focus without interruptions. The greatest successful people in history, artists, innovators, leaders, understood this. They weren't frightened to differentiate themselves from the crowd. They loved seclusion because they knew that's where their best work was born. When you're alone, you have the freedom to explore your passions. You can think without interruption. You can push yourself without worrying about judgment. You may spend time to your ambitions without the views of others slowing you down, but most individuals never do this. They spend their time with pointless relationships, numbing entertainment, and continual social approval. They waste their potential because they're too terrified to break away and work on themselves. But those who enjoy solitude rise above the others. They use their alone time to sharpen their talents, build discipline, and produce something worthwhile. They don't need diversions to feel alive. They don't need approval to keep going. They construct themselves in silence, and when they eventually emerge, they are unstoppable. This is why solitude is not a weakness. It is a gateway, a path that leads to mastery, to greatness, and to a version of oneself that most people will never have the patience to become. Once you step onto this journey, your path will never be the same. Most people let the world determine their thoughts. They absorb opinions, follow trends, and react without questioning. Their minds are overloaded by extraneous stimuli, leaving little space for independent thinking. But when you accept isolation, you reclaim power. You train your mind to become stronger, sharper, and more robust. In solitude, you learn to sit with your ideas without distractions. At first, it's uncomfortable. You may feel restless, worried, even overwhelmed. But if you persist through, something wonderful happens. You begin to gain mental discipline. Discipline is what distinguishes the weak from the powerful. Most individuals lack it because they never challenge themselves to remain in silence. They continually seek stimulus to feel comfortable. But those who master isolation create an unwavering mind. When you spend time alone, you sharpen your focus and acquire control over your emotions. You stop reacting impulsively and start thinking extensively before making judgments. You become mentally tough, able to bear trials without breaking, holding firm even when life gets harsh. This is what sets powerful people unique. They don't need the world's approval to feel confident. They don't rely on distractions to escape their thoughts. They train their thoughts in stillness, so when the world tests them, they don't falter. If you can sit alone with your thoughts without searching for distractions, you are already stronger than others. Mental strength isn't created in comfort, it's built in solitude. And once you manage your thoughts, nothing can control you. Nothing can shake you. Nothing can stop you. Most people depend on others for their happiness, confidence, and motivation. They wait for encouragement, for someone to push them on, for someone to tell them they are good enough. But this kind of dependence makes them weak, because when those people leave, they come apart. Solitude imparts a distinct lesson, the power of self-reliance. When you spend time alone, you are forced to rely on yourself for everything. Your strength, motivation, and discipline. It all comes from within. There's no one to lift you up when you're down, no one to push you when you feel sluggish, no one to tell you what to do. It's just you. At first, this is challenging. You may feel disoriented and doubt may seep in. But the more you accept isolation, the more you realize you don't need anyone else to affirm you. You don't need external motivation to take action. You become your own source of strength. This is the thinking of the truly powerful. They don't wait for others to inspire them. They inspire themselves. They don't wait for permission to act. They make their own judgments. They don't fall apart when people leave. They stay complete because they've constructed themselves from within. Most people never experience this because they fear being alone. They cling to relationships and distractions to avoid facing themselves. But those who love solitude become unstoppable. Once you learn to rely on yourself, you'll never need to depend on anybody else again. Most individuals are readily swayed. Their moods vary based on other people's opinions. Their confidence fades when met with criticism. Their decisions are dictated by fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of standing alone. But those who love solitude become untouchable. When you spend time alone, you cease being controlled by the outer world. You cease craving validation. You stop caring about pointless opinions. You realize that most of the things people chase, approval, attention, popularity, are illusions. They possess no real influence over you until you allow them to. Solitude teaches you how to stand steadfast in who you are. You don't swing with every opinion. You don't break under strain. You acquire an internal stability that no amount of criticism, failure, or rejection can shake. This is why strong people don't dread being alone. They utilize solitude as a weapon, a means to construct a mentality so solid, so unshakable, that nothing can shatter them. Think about it. The people who are the toughest to manipulate, the hardest to bring down, the hardest to manage, are the ones who don't rely on the world to define them. They don't beg for acceptance. They don't chase approval. They know who they are, and that makes them powerful. When you learn to be alone, you discover true freedom. When you stop feeling the urge to fit in, you stop explaining yourself. You stop adjusting to make others comfortable. You recognize that your worth isn't established by how many people like you. It's defined by how solid you stand in your own truth. Once you reach that degree of self-assurance, you become absolutely unstoppable. Most people live reactively. They wake up and are instantly dragged into the cacophony of the world. Notifications, opinions, distractions. Their time is absorbed by others, their vitality sapped by shallow interactions, and their minds overwhelmed by extraneous noise. They are not in control of their lives. They are being dominated. But solitude affects everything. When you accept being alone, you recover your power. You take back control over your time, your concentration, your decisions. Think about it. How much of your day is spent on things that don't genuinely matter? How frequently do you become diverted by people, topics, or tasks that add no genuine value to your life? Solitude eliminates the unneeded. It forces you to prioritize. When you spend time alone, you cease being pulled in 100 different directions. You think clearly, act with intention, and pick what needs your attention instead than letting the world decide for you. You become deliberate, and that's what sets successful individuals unique. They regulate their time, protect their energy, and refuse to allow the noise of the world decide their behavior. This is the power of solitude. It encourages you to take responsibility, focus on what genuinely matters, eliminate distractions, and progress toward your goals with clarity. Most people waste their lives responding to events, while those who enjoy isolation take command. They lead, they construct, they create. Because once you master being alone, you stop living on autopilot and begin living with purpose. Many dread alone, thinking it makes them weak. They believe power derives from being surrounded by others, from constant engagement, from always being in motion. But they fail to understand the truth. Real power is created in silence, in discipline, in the moments when no one is watching. When you accept isolation, you do what others are too terrified to do. You face yourself. You confront your shortcomings, your doubts, your insecurities. And instead of running from them, you work on them. You sharpen your thinking, create resilience, and become the kind of person who flourishes even when no one is around to assist you. Weak individuals seek distractions. Strong people welcome discomfort. Most individuals find for comfort in noise, in connections, in anything that distracts them from sitting alone with their thoughts. But those who understand the power of solitude transform it into fuel. They convert loneliness into focus, solitude into discipline. They utilize their alone time to become so powerful and unyielding that nothing can shatter them. And when they return to the world, people can feel it. They walk with a different energy, one of quiet confidence, control, and inner power. They have built themselves in silence. That's why solitude is not something to fear, it's something to master. Once you learn to stand alone, you realize you're stronger than you ever imagined imaginable. Everything in life changes when you accept solitude. You stop dreading silence, stop seeking validation, and stop depending on others to feel strong. You have built yourself in those quiet moments that no one else could witness. Most individuals will never realize its power. They will chase distractions, filling every vacant area with noise, people, or anything that distracts them from facing themselves. But those who master isolation rise above the others. They build an unshakable intellect, a deep sense of purpose, and a confidence that cannot be shattered. They do not fear rejection since they don't require acceptance. They do not fear failure since they've learned to stand on their own. They do not fear being alone because they understand something most others never will. Being alone is not a weakness. It's a power. The world belongs to those who can stand alone because they are not influenced by distractions. They are not weakened by viewpoints. They are not frightened to walk their own way. And once you walk into this power, nothing can stop you.